Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Tuesday, May 12th, 2026 at 1:02 in the afternoon. So we're here now to have committee discussions on a proposal of amendment to the Senate proposal of amendment on H 648. So we have Chris Curtis from the Attorney General's office to chat with us a little bit about the kiosks and what the AG is seeing. But Chris, welcome. Good to have you back in the committee again.
Hey, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christopher Curtis. I'm an Assistant Attorney General for the state of Vermont. I'm also the director of our Consumer Assistance Program, which is where Vermonters call when they have questions, concerns about their consumer transactions. And it's also a place where we often get reports of fraud or scams with loss. So it's really on that point that I want to share with you our office's position on the bill and the proposed amendment. And I will make sure that I believe the legislature received a report from the Department of Financial Regulation last year on crypto kiosks generally. And as you all know, you took action to create essentially a moratorium or suspension on any new crypto kiosk companies coming into the state, to then monitor the space for the ones that were, then in existence. And so that's the current status. There's been this sort of temporary pause on any new machines coming in. We had provided to the department for its report, and I'll either share with you, or if you have a copy of the report, it's in the appendix, a letter written by the Attorney General to the department with our office's position. And just to refresh your recollections of the contents of that letter, basically it was the position of the Attorney General that these crypto kiosks, the risks far outweigh any reward. That these are frequently the place where targets of scams or fraud victims end up going to put their hard-earned cash into the machines, turn it into crypto, and transmit it to some third party, who then turns out to be a scam artist and not the person that they were thinking that they were engaged with. And that's literally everything from, scammy business opportunities to romance scams to you name it. It happens. And I can share with you, at the time, we looked at a 3-year period. We had about 45 complaints involving cryptocurrencies generally. Not everybody describes exactly how they lost the money. Our job is to intervene as quickly as possible, get that information to federal authorities to try to trace and track it. And then if we can freeze or recoup any of those monies, we do that as well. But among those 45 complaints, that represented over $3 million in losses for Vermonters. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And of those, we knew that about 14 or 15 of those at least were involved crypto kiosks and transfers of money into crypto kiosks that the consumers then subsequently realized, we're never going to see a dime of this again. And this wasn't the party who I thought it was. So it begs the question, unlike many other forms of money transfer, these ATM-like machines are completely unsupervised. They're placed in these sort of retail environments, often a gas station or a mini mart. And we're so limited. I'm really talking about like the 1 to 3 that may exist in Vermont at this time. But it used to be, and certainly in other states, we're seeing like these are completely unsupervised. There's nobody to intervene and say, are you really sure you know who you're dealing with here? Have you checked to make sure? There are disclosures on the machines themselves. I will tell you, it is bound to be confounding to consumers. I myself took it upon myself to go into one when there used to be others around in Vermont, and I flipped through the page. It is page after page after page of touchscreen content, which not entirely clear to the consumers. And if you are the consumer and you're engaged in a high pressure transaction, you're basically looking to, how do I get to the endpoint as quickly as possible, get my money into the machine, have the transfer take place. So I'm not sure how effective any of those notices or disclosures actually are for the average consumer. So long story short, we had concerns, we have concerns. And there is nothing that disbanding with crypto kiosks in their entirety in the state of Vermont would do to interfere with the online marketplace for cryptocurrencies. If people want to have their digital wallet, or they want it on their phone or on their desktop or on a laptop, or some other secure setting that they might use to engage in these kinds of speculative trades or money transfers, they're free to do so. What your my understanding of what your amendment would do would be just to say, so long as these are not unregulated for-profit machines where there's no federal oversight, there's really no state oversight in terms of how they function, they're just not going to be permitted to be in use in the state of Vermont. There's nothing that says, even with the banks, if you're the subject of a fraudulent transfer, if you have an FDIC-backed account, there's a way for you to have some assurance that you might be able to get your funds restored to you. In this space, there's really nothing. There's no oversight from the traditional banking community. We don't know who the actors are on the other end of these crypto wallets. So it's a really, really, frankly, it's a scary environment for consumers to be in. And as General Clark said then, and I think she would say now, there's really no real fundamental purpose as a financial instrument for people to be able to transfer funds in this manner, to have crypto kiosks be the means through which they do that. So that's what we're seeing. We know that these concerns are shared by federal authorities and have been for some time. The FTC, the FBI, DOJ, all share these kinds of concerns and have said so in one way, shape, or form at various times. So I think there are a lot of people looking at this space and trying to understand sort of how and why these operators came to be. Obviously, they're making money, or they wouldn't have these products out there for people to use. But ultimately, if the entrepreneurs who are placing these kiosks out around the country, if they don't have any skin in the game in terms of having to refund people the money when they're ripped off, I mean, that's a fundamental protection. If they don't have any skin in that game, then what incentive do they really have to try to take affirmative steps to protect consumers on the front end? So that was one of the recommendations we made in that 2024 letter was, maybe there should be a refund policy that says, hey, if you're the victim of a fraud or a scam, the operator of the machine has to pay you back because they didn't do any due diligence to know who the parties were that were engaged in these kinds of transactions. So there's all kinds of ways that the federal or perhaps even state authorities could potentially regulate. But I think for now, if the question is a full moratorium on these machines, is that going to benefit consumers? I would say yes, because it's going to eliminate those people who might otherwise get caught up in scams, and it will do very little or nothing to stop the people who actually just want to engage in the trading of these cryptocurrencies because they can do so through other means.
Questions for Chris? Chris, but to the last year, we did put some regulation on of crypto kiosks in the state of Vermont. I think they all pulled out. Maybe it was a couple of years ago. They all pulled out except for one company. Just wondering, what's the AG's thoughts on the regulations that we put in place? I think it's still the opinion of the number of people that there's no place for crypto kiosks in the state, but just wondering if you've seen any issues since we placed those in those regulations, and I think we only have one player now.
Yeah, and so I think the part of the regulatory environment that you created was basically a moratorium on others entering the system. So that, I think, has minimized the number of complaints that we're seeing, because there's only, DFR can probably testify to this more ably than I am in terms of the number of locations, but I think you're down to one to maybe at the max 3, but maybe it's just one at this point. So that obviously would limit the number of consumers that are going to go and seek that out or would even necessarily know about it. That was probably the single most effective thing that your legislation did to stop the flow of complaints coming to our office in this space. But I would say until these are federally regulated or there's some kind of oversight mechanism that full scale provides greater consumer assurances, not just of disclosure and notice, but of cash back when people are taken advantage of, I think there's very little that's going to stop bad actors from trying to take advantage of consumer space. And a crypto kiosk is just another tool they have at their disposal to do so. So that would be our position.
I think the question for us is, do we extend the moratorium for another year? Extend the sunset on the moratorium, or we just outright ban kiosks in the state of Vermont? I think that's kind of what's before us.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I can't remember the exact dates, but we took action on this last year, didn't we? And I think at the time we included some consumer protections. I would consider them limited. It was, I think, a 2,000, 5,000 limit on transaction. I can't remember. And then there were some proposed refund provisions. But again, it was kind of limited because it was confined to new customers. And I think there was a period of time that defined customers. And to be clear, I would have much preferred much longer refund situation. I think that's kind of cool. But I guess my question is, we did this stuff last year. Now we're maybe taking another step in terms of the moratorium, but also maybe banning the operation. I mean, legislature can do what it wants to do on this stuff. Any thoughts on that? Not necessarily that there's anything changed in terms factually, but maybe things have changed in terms of public policy. Trying to think of rationale for taking action so early on something we passed last year.
It's a great question. And yes, I want to just confirm that, I think the steps the legislature took last year were very reasonable and measured, and try to strike a balance. And so I can understand why you're in a position now of saying, oh, do we go even further? Do we maintain the status quo? See how that works? I mean, I guess to the extent that there's essentially, one or a very small number of these units still even residing in the state, like what's the value real? I mean, that's not really a marketplace at that point, right? It's just, it's a single outlet. And so I don't know that the concerns around fraud and abuse have been entirely addressed. Again, I think the moratorium did a lot to make sure that we weren't getting these new reports of put my money in and where did it go? And now this person's not corresponding with me anymore. So that was probably the single most effective preventive measure that you could have taken as a body. I do think there are lots of questions that have implications for your policy, which is, what's the posture of the federal government going to be around this area in the future? And for a number of years, it seemed like, well, maybe it's going to be a more regulatory environment, and maybe there will be more stronger rules to the road and more consumer protections. Over time, maybe that's changing. Maybe now there's a more favorable environment for crypto operators and cryptocurrencies generally, where it's sort of like, it's a fair market and anybody can play and the rules are going to be set by industry. I don't know. That ebbs and flows with different administrations, and that's above my pay grade to speculate on. And that's going to change over time potentially too. But I think in terms of what Vermont is doing and can or should do, that's the question that's before you. So, I think the precautionary principle sort of says, well, in an unregulated marketplace, or for the most part unregulated, do you at this point say, hey, people are allowed to engage in these transactions? That's fair. If you're a speculator and you want to try to make some money in this area, that's what you feel comfortable doing, and maybe you're studying how this all plays out, you can still do that from home. I guess the fundamental question is sort of, what is going on where there's a need or a desire to pump cash into a machine that's then being transmitted to some crypto wallet somewhere? What's the benefit really to the consumer in that transaction that they couldn't have otherwise done from home or from a secure account somewhere where they have some control and understanding of who and what they're dealing with, as opposed to putting cash into a machine that then is transmitting that somewhere else? I mean, that's just a very unusual set of circumstances.
Just to be clear, I think you said at the beginning of your testimony that you thought that the risk greatly outweighed the benefits. That certainly resonates.
Thank you for the question, but I think part of what your policy navigation is trying to contemplate is sort of there's state activity, but then where are things moving on the federal landscape as well? And so the state can only do what it can do. So I would say what you've done to date has been extremely effective. And so ultimately it's a policy decision for you all, whether you want to say, look, let's just clear the marketplace for now, and then what will be, or is it, the state is satisfied with where its policy is to date. I would just say, I just don't think, to the extent that these machines still exist, are still accepting cash, and people are still being deceived, I think there's very little that's going to ultimately protect those consumers, even at that one kiosk or 3 kiosks or whatever it ends up being, because there's no friction in the transaction. There's no person to stop. With money transmitters, if you go into a retail environment and you want to wire money someplace, there's usually somebody there, even with gift cards now. Most of the major retailers that sell gift cards know if somebody's buying a stack in bulk, they're like, are you sure about that? Why are you buying so many? What's going on? Their staff get trained to ask those questions, not to stop the purchase entirely, but just to say, do you really know who you're dealing with here? Oh yeah, they threatened to cut off my electric, utility, said they were going to cut me off if I didn't come with gift cards. And those retail staff employees now will very often say, that's not a thing like that. Your utilities don't do that. You don't pay bills with gift cards. Those are for gifts. And so you might be a victim of a scam if you really thought this through. And we've done a lot of work with a lot of those same retailers to say, hey, and if they're skeptical of you, they don't want to listen because emotions are high or they're feeling pressure or whatever it might be, have them call us, have them call our office. But that requires a human being to do that. If you're just standing alone at the kiosk and somebody's on their phone telling you what to do, you don't have that circuit breaker to intervene and tell you, like, hey, you don't have to follow through. It's like, stop what you're doing for a minute. Let's think about this. Because once the money is gone, it's gone very often. So I really appreciate the work that you all are doing in this area, because I think it's while you've constrained that market significantly, I think it's a bit of the Wild West out there, and people are losing money. And I just want to remind, so in cryptocurrencies, just to our office alone, and this doesn't count other people that reported to the police or might have reported to federal authorities, whatever, over $3 million in a very limited period of time for just 45 scam victims. And of those, about a third involved crypto kiosks. So that to me is very troubling.
Remember the time frame for that?
That was a 3-year period from 22 to 2020, end of 2024. Yeah. I realized that the letter that General Clark had sent to for that report that came to the legislature was actually sent directly to DFR. So if you all would like a copy of that letter, I think that pretty well encapsulates my testimony here today.
If we could send that over, great.
You have to do that.
The questions on the kiosk for Chris? Chris, do you have any information on the second part of this amendment deals with merchant cash advances?
I thought I might get this question. So all I'm prepared to testify to today on this question is that we do get these complaints. And I do think I have some concerns about that marketplace as well, in terms of like what is being promised to small businesses, and then finding out either the terms and conditions were not as promised, or what is happening with fly-by-night operators who actually are not even sending the purported loan. And there's a part of me, I don't pretend to be an expert on merchant cash advances, and there may be other parties, maybe DFR or Bankers Association, others that would have compelling testimony at this point. But there is a part I see a lot out there, and I see people accessing a lot out there that's just on the internet that makes these pretty bold promises. And so I have concerns about exactly who these operators are and what they're doing in terms of their representations, and how small businesses might get caught up in something where they're have a high cash need, but it might be temporary, but they're getting into terms and conditions that they either then can't get out of, or they end up getting swindled altogether. And that is, I mean, we're dealing then with, larger increments of money because it's not just the individual consumer. They're thinking about how am I funding my business? So I think you're right to be looking at this area. And I will do a little more digging on our end at CAP to find, again, a suitable time range and come back to you with kind of what we're seeing in terms of total alleged losses and numbers. So I'll get that with the letter that I forwarded you from Charity. We'll run a quick report for you and get that back to your committee ASAP. Okay.
I think we're looking to probably move this amendment tomorrow. It still has to make its way over back to this, so. Fine.
I'll get back to you today or tomorrow.
I think the merchant cash advances, I think saw something on, might have been 60 Minutes, a couple months, 2 or 3 months ago, and after we sent 648 over to the Senate, about these, they did an expose on these merchant cash advances, and it kind of clicked with me because there's a lot of not cold calls, but cold emails I've gotten. I think business people are getting those saying that, you're pre-approved for $200,000 up to $200,000 cash advance, and then hearing that expose on TV kind of clicked with me that this is an area that we really should be thinking about, making sure that there's some regulations around it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, payday lenders that we did a number of years ago is similar to this. And not banning them, but making sure that they're licensed and has some regulations around.
Yeah, I don't know about anybody else here in the room. I get unsolicited scam calls and text messages and emails for like personal financing, right? And they're like, oh, we'll give you this great, loan. Here's a bunch of money and you're just going to get pre-approved and we're going to give you all of this stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, man, oh man, first of all, how to get on the list to your work on data brokers in the past. My guess is that lists of consumers are getting bought and sold. And so you end up on a list somehow, and then they just start sending you these things. And so if you have something in your life that goes on, whether you're an individual or a business person, and you're getting these things, and suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, how is I going to come up with that $20,000 for my new roof that my insurance isn't going to cover, but I got to come up with out of pocket, right? Suddenly it sounds too good to be true. And then you're going down this rabbit hole with an institution that's not a federally regulated institution, but they're offering you all this money. And I think the same might be happening in the business community where they're somehow getting lists of names of business owners.
You get on your call right now?
Is that really?
Serious.
Okay. So this is out there and it actually ties in directly with, I think, all of the good work that you did on data brokers and big tech. It's like, how are people finding the information? That information is circulating and then it's setting people up to maybe get into something that they don't really know what they're getting into. So anyway, thank you. I will get back to you with those numbers and with that letter from General Clark. And I don't want to take up more time. I know you have other witnesses. So, all right. Thank you.
If you want to testify, John.
Joe and Ethan are on the schedule, but they're actually here just to provide answers to any question the committee may have. They've already testified, so they don't really need to testify again. Larry, if you'd like to join us, thanks for coming back to Vermont.
Get a little condo here or something. I come all the time. So I met, I think all of you, my name is Larry Lip. I'm the general counsel for CoinFlip. We're one of the largest crypto kiosk companies in the world. We're in 6 countries all across the US. We have 2 kiosks in Vermont. We have one in Central Beverage and Essex Junction and Lipton Mart store in Battleboro. Those are only 2 kiosks in the state. All due respect to the AG's office, there are a lot of misinformation that was given to this committee. So you heard the person testifying saying that there's not a refund policy in this state. There is, in fact, a refund policy that all of you passed. It's the best refund policy in the entire country. And I'm here to provide data about our crypto kiosks and not cryptocurrency in general. There are always all these facts that are being flung around about, the billions of dollars of crypto fraud. Fraud in this country is a problem. And we've addressed it at crypto kiosks with this bill. And I'll go through what that bill does just to remind everyone. But first, I want to tell you that, I asked our team to calculate since this bill went into effect on July 1st, 2025, we're the only operator in the state. There had been 410 transactions totaling $188,000 of transactions, and there have been no scam victims in this state. We had one person contact us asking for a refund, and it was not a refund because we had held that transaction. So that means that we did not complete the transaction. We held it for consumer protection purposes, meaning that when they called us, we refunded them, we returned their money to them. So they got their money and the scammer got no money. So there has been no harm to any consumers and no societal harm in where scammers are getting money. That cannot be said for any other financial product in the country, in this state, or in the world. The mobile applications, the online exchanges, those are options for people to buy crypto, but those do not come with the same regulations that happen here. So what the AG's office is suggesting is that we push people to an unregulated alternative, when in Vermont, we are highly regulated. We are regulated by the federal government under the Bank Secrecy Act and US Patriot Act. We're registered with FinCEN. We have a money transmitter license, and we have to register each kiosk. We've been examined now twice in the state this year, once as part of our money transmitter licensing examination, and once for each one of the kiosks. And there have been no complaints about us and no scams. So I'm a little surprised to be here talking about a ban when the bill is working and the bill is being copied by almost every other state in this country. And, the AG's office has said there's no friction in the process. That is not true. There is a lot of friction in this process. And I'm going to go through what the bill requires just to kind of remind everyone of that. So, these are all DFR's recommendations. We agreed to every one of the recommendations, and that became a part of the bill. So if there are other recommendations, then let's add them to this bill to show that you can run a clean operation. I'm not here to testify on behalf of other operators who don't do enough to protect consumers, but they're not in this state and they won't come back to this state. And if a bad actor wants to come to the state, then one of the regulators in this room should prevent that or revoke their money transmitter license, like is happening for some of our competitors across the country right now. So there's digital and paper receipts. That was important to DFR. We don't have paper receipt printers. We added them. We take all ID for all customers for their transactions at $1. Federally, that's only required at $1,000, but we do it for every single customer. We take the email for all customers. We have to call, speak to any customer over 60 before they can transact. That is the most vulnerable population in this country, is 60 plus. So every single one of them have to talk to us on the phone. That is the friction right there, because if they don't understand what their transaction is about, we block them from transacting. And we make sure that they don't go somewhere else and buy gift cards and send gift cards to a scammer. If you send a gift card to a scammer, you don't get a refund like you do with a crypto kiosk transaction. And you can buy gift cards up to $10,000 in this country without having to do any of these steps. So maybe the cashier at a Target will tell you, oh, maybe you shouldn't send this to someone. They're not required to do that. We also have transaction monitoring policies and due diligence policies that are required. We have to record a call with any customer who's buying more than $5,000 in 5 days. In 5 days, you can buy $50,000 of gift cards in this country. Live customer service, 24 hours a day. We take a photo of every customer at their transaction. We wallet pin, that's required because in one wallet, one customer, that prevents scammers from directing multiple people to send to one wallet address was an indication of a scam. We have to use blockchain analytics to automatically stop high-risk transactions. So if somebody's trying to send to a wallet that's been flagged as criminal or fraudulent, we automatically stop that so they can't transact. We have a fee cap of 15%. I know there's a lot of concern about how much that is, but that's similar to a currency exchange booth. These are physical cash transactions. And, there's a lot of talk about, we don't need these, the risk outweighs the benefits. Why would people use this? We'll ask the hundreds of people who have used our product in this state safely why they use it. We have asked them. They say it's fast, easy, convenient. Sometimes people say they don't like using the internet for their financial transactions because they don't trust that their information will be safe because of hacks and other things. People say that the 24-hour day customer service helps them. People will pay a premium for a convenient service, and they often say you're cheaper than your competitors. That's not as big of a deal in Vermont because we're the only ones, we're the only choice. There's a new customer period of 30 days. So in that 30-day period, you have a lower limit because you're higher risk for these pressure scams. But after 30 days, you can't say reasonably that someone would still fall for a pressure scam when they get a phone call like you just got, Representative, from someone pretending to be someone else. Like maybe you fall for that once, you're having the worst day of your life, someone catches you in that moment, and you could fall for it, but they're not going to be able to call you every day for 30 days to do that. And in that 30-day period, they get a full refund if they contact us and say they've been scammed. There has not been a single customer who has been denied a refund in this state, and only one customer who asked for one, and they were returned the full amount. And then after that new user period, there's a refund of fees for customers. That ensures that the operator still has skin in the game, so that they're losing money if they have fraud victims. And like I've said, no one has asked for that because no one has been defrauded in this state. And that's something we have, nationwide. And something that, we also are doing is consumer protection holds. That's not a part of the bill, but that's something we found is very effective. So that if there's a high risk transaction, we hold it for a certain amount of time, until either that time elapses, or we talk to the person on the phone, or until we can compare the photos of the person at the kiosk to the person who's transacting. So one of those we do is what we call our image mismatch interstate hold. So if somebody transacts in Vermont, the first time that account tries to use a kiosk in a different state, we hold that transaction until we can verify that all the photos match: the ID, the photos of the person at the kiosk in Vermont, and the photos of the person at another kiosk. If there's a mismatch, something wrong has happened. We don't complete that transaction. We figure out, is this a scam victim or is this a money launderer? So I raise all this because we're willing to support robust regulation. This is the most robust regulation in the country, and it's working because there have been no scam victims. So if this is about facts, then the facts are that this is working. So why not extend the moratorium? We would support that another year. Our competitors would say we're doing that because we want to be the only operator here. But I can tell you, with only 2 kiosks, you cannot turn a profit in a state with 2 kiosks. When you have separate regulation and you have separate examinations, me having to come here. So this is not about money for us. This is about the point. The point is that you can run a clean business, and this is a very good bill. And we've been supporting very similar regulations in dozens of states. There are about 24 states that have passed regulations. So I understand that there are a few states that have banned us. Those are unique situations, and I have explanations for each of those states if anybody's interested to hear. So I've been talking a lot, so I would love to answer questions. I know a lot about this industry. I know a lot about crypto. And like my last point is, you're not going to ban crypto fraud by banning kiosks. It will just move to online exchanges, to gift cards, to somewhere else. So the best way to keep Vermonters safe is to have a regulated entity that can intervene when someone has gotten one of those calls that they shouldn't, to tell them, don't do this. Because if you just block them from transacting, they'll just do it online. And you can buy $10,000 of gift cards online where no one's intervening and calling you. Whereas here, you have to have a phone call if you're over 60, or if you're buying more than $5,000 in 5 days.
Thanks, Larry. Questions for Larry? Jonathan?
I think you mentioned something about other states are looking to utilize legislation that we have. Are there several? Who's doing that?
Yeah, so I would say every state that has passed a bill since this bill was passed, I think went into effect July 1st, 2025, has parts of it. So it's not exactly a copy and paste, but most of the states have all of these provisions in there: the wallet pinning, the blockchain analytics, calls for elderly customers, refund provisions has become standard, and we support that in every state. When the first state had a refund policy, we did not like that because we're the only industry that has to refund scam victims. So if you are scammed with a gift card and you call up and say, I bought a gift card, I sent it to someone who said I had to pay for my granddaughter's bail, she's in jail in Mexico, you don't get a refund because that was an authorized transaction. So under federal Reg E, the only way you have to refund customers for these financial transactions if it's an unauthorized transaction, meaning someone hacked into your account, or someone, was able to use your credit card at a Walgreens, because the Walgreens is supposed to check your ID to make sure that you're the person who owns that credit card. So then, that's on the financial institution. But here, we're the only financial industry that has to refund these authorized transactions. So if a Vermonter is getting a call from someone, you want them sent to one of our kiosks because we'll prevent it. Or if it slips through the cracks, we'll refund them. But that doesn't happen for gift cards or wire transfers. And, the FTC data, I think, was like $16 billion of fraud last year. It's horrible.
My question was about states.
Yeah. And so the states, Illinois, Colorado, Minnesota, Rhode Island, almost every state. There's like 20 states, and I can get you an exact list. Sorry, I started talking too much. I'm a lawyer. I don't get paid by the hour anymore or word, but I still have to talk.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with your point that there are provisions around refunds that we enacted. My concern then, as it is now, is that it's limited refund to new customers, 90 days kind of thing. And that always struck me as kind of inadequate. Because you're talking about fraud. And the way I sort of think about, what sort of liability to impose in these kinds of situations, to me, you always look at, well, who could do the most to prevent that fraud, or who bears the responsibility? And I'm thinking of the different actors that are involved here. You got the customer, they don't know much. I understand the disclosures and everything, but I think as a practical matter, they're not going to know too much, especially if they're senior or whatever. And obviously the crypto platform, they don't, that's pretty anonymous. So, the only party, it would seem to me, that even has a chance of being able to do the due diligence, to look behind the curtain kind of thing, is a company like yourselves, which is why I always thought, if in fact, there isn't all these other things working, I'm a big fan of absolute liability. Because in this kind of situation, none of the other parties really have the wherewithal in terms of information or technology to make a difference. Which is so that's bearing on how I consider what we should do now. I think there are a lot of risks involved in this kind of transaction. It's really easy to do this, and I worry about people, even if they might not know about the fraud after 90 days, getting caught up in a situation where they're losing a lot of money. And that worries me. That was a question you can comment on.
So, we've agreed to every consumer protection that has been proposed in Vermont. So if there are changes to make you comfortable, we would probably support them. I would just say there has to be some time frame on when you request a refund. It can't be unlimited, because you can't run a business if there's unlimited liability for all time, where someone 10 years later can ask for a refund. But if that 90 days seems too short, that's the longest in the country for someone to ask for a refund. We could make that longer, right? 120 days. That won't affect our business, because we have the data to show that we've had one person there was an attempted scam, but it was stopped, right? So there is that friction involved, and we are doing that as a company to protect people, frankly, from themselves, right? Who are being preyed on by these horrible scammers from different countries that call them and convince them to do something. So there are ways to stop that, but my advice is that there just needs to be some time frame on it. And the 90 days is what was the recommendation of DFR.
Sure. But it seems to me that fraud is fraud, that's sort of you have to prove fraud. The customer would have to say, I mean, in terms of the time frame and all, if it's 6 months from now and the consumer can say, this was a fraudulent transaction, they're going to have to be able to show this fraudulent transaction. And in that kind of situation, it seems like there should be some absolute liability on the company. Not that you're bad. It's just you're the only party that has enough knowledge or could have enough knowledge to make a difference.
Yeah, so I'd say that just the one sort of caveat is that there's no tribunal or court that is actually determining that this is a scam victim. The scam victim self-reports and provides a police report, right? So there is no fact finding to actually determine that someone was a scam victim. So this hasn't happened in Vermont, but there could be a bad actor who buys a bunch of Bitcoin through our kiosk, the price goes down, they file a false police report and say, I've been defrauded, I want a refund. So if the price of Bitcoin in 10 years or 5 years or a year goes way down, we'll be barraged with people filing false police reports and asking for a refund because they've been a scam victim. I know that 99% of the country is honest and won't do that, but there are people scamming people in this country as well. There are bad actors out there who would take advantage of that loophole. So if we wanted to put in a provision that if a court determines that someone is a scam victim, they get a full refund, then maybe that's a solution for that to address that concern. Or we extend the time frame for when they can submit that, report to make it longer. And as of now, there's no evidence that the time period is too short because no one has asked for a refund outside of that 90-day time frame where it's been denied. So the concern is that if there's going to be sort of unlimited liability for unlimited time period, then there should be someone who's actually determining that it's a scam victim. And if they are determined to be a scam victim, then yes, they should get a refund.
Motion?
So, thank you. One, is it possible to get a copy of the testimony?
Sure, yes, I scribbled all over this one, but I'll get you one via email.
Thank you, appreciate that. And then I was wondering if you might be able to go over those numbers again. You said that the two kiosks, that they were processing how many transactions this past year?
Yeah, so 410 transactions since the law went into effect July 1st, 2025, with a total of $188,000 of transactions. And out of that, there was that one fraud, a potential fraud victim or attempted fraud victim that the $2,000 was returned to them.
Okay, thank you. And then I have one other question, which you were talking about the phone call that you have with consumers that are over 60. Do you have any sense of just what the content of that is? Like, what is that like?
Yeah, so we have like a script that the consumer protection people use. It's like they're trained twice a year, the CX representatives. And it's, they ask the purpose of the transaction. Has someone sent you there to make to buy something or to purchase something? Are you under duress? They ask, about cryptocurrency in general. Do you understand what you're buying? Do you have access to your wallet? What wallet do you use? So the questions are designed to elicit from someone if they don't know what they're doing or they've been sent there by somebody else. And then if they fail that, then they can't transact. And those questions change over time, but I'm also happy to, I don't have it memorized exactly what is asked, but I've seen it at some point and I'm happy to share that as well.
That would be great.
And we're happy to take advice from people about like what should be asked to try to catch scams, more frequently.
Okay. And I'm curious about like when those conversations are happening, how are the consumers responding to them? Like, do they find it helpful? Do they find it overly intrusive? Like,
I don't know that I have the best answer for that. I do know that some people get upset, right? Because they think they have to make a crypto, and I don't know if this is for Vermont. I'm not talking more nationwide because we do these calls across the country. People do sometimes like threaten to sue us. They get upset because they think that something bad is going to happen to them if they don't buy the crypto. So that's why those agents are trained to try to walk them off the ledge and say, you can't do this. You can't, no government agency, no FBI, you can never use a crypto kiosk to make this sort of a purchase. And, I don't get as involved in the ones where the person's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't do this because that's not like the high risk ones. The high risk ones where people threatening us and things like that. But it's certainly something I can look into.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious also to know if they're training this kind of within, I'm guessing it's, within facilitation, but also if it's like, I don't know, trauma informed or any kind of, like what the sort of mental health
Sure.
kind of soft aspect of it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure of that exactly. I do know they're trained twice a year on, consumer fraud techniques. Certainly that is a very good takeaway to take back that, we could probably always do a better job of, making sure to help people who are having mental health issues or, people who are being defrauded will probably be somewhat traumatized after it. So that's certainly a very good suggestion and a good takeaway. I don't know exactly how the agents are trained in that regard, though.
Process question, so forgive the techie stuff. So I actually have a crypto wallet and it's a pretty long number that I would need to put in to access that. So can you take me through the process if I wanted to use your machine? How would I go about, do I have to like key that 16-word number in order to use the wallet?
So, no, we use a QR code. So it's like the little square with the black and white boxes. So that's how the camera that's on the kiosks, you take a picture of your digital wallet, you scan it through the QR code because, if you had to type it in, people would make mistakes all the time and crypto would be getting sent to places it shouldn't. So that's also how the scammer gets to the scam victim is by sending them a QR code for a wallet that is controlled by the scammer and not by the victim.
My second question is, obviously I can put money into my crypto wallet. Can I take money out of my crypto wallet through your kiosks?
Yes, we have sell machines where you can sell your crypto as well.
Now, are they separate machines or are they just part of the same machine?
So there's different machines. It's the same machine buy and sell, but not all of our machines have both capabilities because most of our business is people buying crypto. So we have them spread across the country. And I'm not actually sure if the two in Vermont are buy and sell machines, but if that was something that was important to to anyone here, I can make sure that those two become buy and sell machines. And I can actually find that out pretty quickly on our website after this hearing when I can get to my phone.
Questions for Larry?
So 410 transactions in Vermont since last year. What percentage, what number included phone calls for that level of friction? Do you know?
I don't, I can certainly find that out. Yeah,
And we're looking at less than a year of data and one case of known fraud that you had a transaction hold on.
Yep.
You do transaction holds on what percentage of the transactions that happen in Vermont?
every single transaction has a 48-hour hold on it.
So that person reached out to you in that first 48 hours. Okay, so that was lucky for you, right? That they noticed it that quickly. And are there any customers that are currently in process of trying to get a refund that haven't received their money back yet?
No. And just sort of follow up, we did some data analytics at one point to see how long it took for people to call us about being defrauded. And the time, and it's maybe a little stale at this point, it's not specific to Vermont, but about 60% of people called us in 24 hours. So that's why we've done the 48-hour hold to try to capture as large of an amount of those people as possible.
What was the longest, amount of time that somebody waited to call you on that to report a fraud?
I'm not sure. I know that it's been a long time, especially when refund provisions came into effect in a lot of states. We did have a couple of people reach out and saying that they wanted a refund. Not for Vermont. I can think of an example in another state where, they transacted a few years ago and they were asking for a full refund.
I'm debating on whether I'm going to say this out loud, but I think I'm going to say it anyway. When you say that you're protecting people from themselves, I find that offensive. I think that nobody is choosing to give money to somebody that they don't know and don't trust. They are actively being scammed, and it's our job as a society to make sure that we don't set up systems to make that something that happens easily. And so, that rubbed me the wrong way significantly.
I apologize. I was trying to pair them together when I said protecting them from themselves and scammers. So I wasn't trying to imply that it's their fault, but sorry, I apologize.
Thank you.
Questions for Larry? Larry, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Fishman? Mr. Fishman, are you with us? Why don't we take 10 minutes? We'll go off live and I don't know if you can see if we can get a hold of Mr. Fisher. Okay, we'll go off live and be back in 10 minutes.